Chapter 3480.
All right, the young crown princess seemed to have already reminded this lord before.
She had even asked him again and again if he wanted a different way of dying, but he did not listen. Everyone could not help but sigh and shake their heads.
Soon after, they heard the crown princess coldly say, "Banish the Zhou family to the bitterly cold lands of the northwest.
In this lifetime, they are not allowed to return to the Mo kingdom capital."
Zhou Yuan plopped down on the ground, staring blankly at this stoic-faced crown prince consort whose face was filled with indifference. He muttered, "No, you can't treat us like this.
You can't do this."
Abba swept a glance over him.
"Oh, you don't want to be banished. That is to say, you want to die a bit more quickly? Colluding with the enemy, betraying the country, leading the wolf into the house, harboring the enemy."
Abba's cold and desolate voice clearly fell into the ears of Zhou Yuan's family.
"Don't want to be banished? Do you want to die?" Zhou Yuan's mother turned pale with fright and widened her eyes.
She hastily crawled forward and covered her son's mouth with one hand.
At this moment, she finally regained her wits. Just how stupid of a thing had she done before?
Watching the young crown princess turn around and leave, the old woman opened her mouth but was unable to make a sound for a long time.
She did not dare to make a fuss again.
The young crown princess was clearly a little fellow who could be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. If she dared to make a fuss in front of her again, her end would only be more miserable and tragic. Thinking of this, Zhou Yuan's family was like a defeated rooster, their heads drooping as they were escorted away. Pu Ruolan sighed in relief and secretly clasped her hands with her mother, Qiao Wenxiu. In the future, when this family left the capital, their days should be much smoother. At least they would not have to constantly face this disgusting family. However, Pu Ruolan sighed and glanced back at her sister-in-law. She pitied her delicate and weak sister-in-law. Life in the bitterly cold lands of the northwest would probably not be easy.
Qiao Wenxiu shook her head and also sighed. "This Miss Gao is truly unlucky."
She was the daughter of a wealthy family, but in the future, she would have to follow Zhou Yuan and his family to the bitter cold of the northwest and be sent to work. However, Qiao Wenxiu only sighed a little and then put away the trace of sympathy that occasionally appeared. To put it bluntly, these people had only themselves to blame. In the future, the mother and daughter should just live their own lives and not think too much about other things.
That night, the palace banquet held by the old great king was very lively.
All the officials and their families were gathered together, and it could be considered a joyous and harmonious atmosphere.
Nothing strange happened all the way until they left in the middle of the night.
This made all the officials who were on tenterhooks sincerely shed tears of sympathy for themselves. They were truly frightened by this banquet. He still remembered that every time the great king held a banquet, there would always be all kinds of situations. Today's palace banquet was truly smooth and beautiful. During this time, a small incident occurred. The 10th princess Moli proposed a toast to the crown princess and accidentally spilled wine on the crown princess. Apart from this, the entire banquet passed without any disturbances. It was so peaceful that these officials did not dare to believe their eyes. After the banquet, Abba and the crown prince led the Qiao family back to the eastern palace.
Along the way, he saw Mo Lian frown.
Abba could not help but glance at her curiously.
"Why are you always frowning?"
"Today, Moli proposed a toast to you and intentionally spilled wine on you."
Chapter 3481.
"Why did you stop me when I wanted to berate her?"
Prince Mo asked in displeasure. "It's nothing more than a girl's little tricks," Abba said dryly, her eyes rippling. "There's no need to get angry at her for these kinds of little tricks. She put on an act and said she wanted to lure you to change clothes. Wasn't it all premeditated? Why do these women always like to play these tricks?" Prince Mo couldn't help but get angry.
The two of them were currently in the same carriage, so only Hui Feng and a few other personal guards were accompanying them, so they could hear what they were saying.
The Qiao family was in the carriage behind them.
Father and second uncle were already dead drunk and were currently snoring in the carriage. Abba couldn't help but chuckle, and she reached out to pinch his angry handsome face.
"All right, It's all child's tricks. No need to pay attention to them. At her current level, a few inexplicable plots and machinations actually didn't count for much. In the face of absolute strength, she could just crush those small conflicts that couldn't be seen in public. There was no need to get angry. I think she's living too comfortably, Emolien said angrily. In any case, he wouldn't allow anyone to have crooked thoughts about him, Jojo. He couldn't even bear to let her suffer the slightest bit of grievance, so why should she be bullied by others? Abba couldn't help but chuckle. She then grabbed his hand and blinked. I heard that when the enemy came from the divine prefecture, the 10th princess was humiliated before you rushed to the royal palace. After the incident, she seemed to have sought death the night she returned to the palace. If she really didn't want to live, she could have died that night, Emolien said apathetically. To put it bluntly, everything was merely an act in order to gain the old great king's attention and pity in hopes of obtaining more benefits. He understood this father of his too well. Although he was a repulsive person who lost his mind due to lust, he had always been benevolent toward his children. Abba glanced at the crown prince's disdainful gaze and couldn't help burrowing into his embrace with a chuckle. She moved her little head and comforted, "All right. We're all going back tomorrow. Why do you have to be angry with your insensible sister? Anyway, we won't have many chances to meet in the future. When I come back in a few years, she might have already been married off. Naturally, we won't have to meet again. I must teach her a lesson," Prince Mo said coldly. Abba raised his head and looked at him. His big eyes curved as he casually advised, "I think she must be angry that this happened because of me. In fact, it was indeed our Chow family that caused her to be humiliated. It's just a trivial matter. We're leaving tomorrow, so don't bother with her anymore." "Humph." Prince Mo reached out and hugged her, his chin rubbing against her little head. "You have a good temper. I have to tell Mother to marry off this troublesome girl as soon as possible, so that you won't be wronged when we come back in the future." Abba looked at him speechlessly. He reached out to hold his face and said softly, "A girl's marriage is extremely important. Don't get involved. Just ignore her in the future. She's your sister after all, so you don't have to be too harsh on her." Emolien's eyes brightened. He reached out to hug his little wife and said with a smile, "All right then, I'll listen to my wife." When his wife said that a girl's marriage was extremely important, she looked at him with bright eyes, as if there were stars shining in them. It almost melted his heart. Chapter 3482. After returning to the Eastern Palace that night, Abba asked Emolien to set up a defensive barrier and send his family members directly into Paradise Planet. After helping her father and second uncle sober up, Xiao Mu led her joyous family members on a tour around Paradise Planet. Then, he took some time to chat with senior sister Su Shanshan before instructing her to take her medicine and go to bed quickly. Early the next morning, Abba and Emolien bade farewell to the Empress Dowager, the Great King, Empress Zhao, and the others, and left Seekong Planet. This trip to and fro between Seekong Planet and the Divine Continent, riding the crimson firmament blue waves, was simply a walk in the park. It didn't take long for them to return to Qingyue City. Now that their family members had been brought back to them, Abba and Emolien were naturally much more relaxed. After arriving at Qingyue City, Abba simply let the Chow family members out of Paradise Planet and took them to eat and drink along the way, admiring the scenery around Qingyue City as they leisurely headed in the direction of Dragon Flame City. No one was happier than little Chow Senator along the way. He felt so blissful that he was practically bubbling. If it weren't for the fact that it was early every morning, the little monk would definitely nag him to wake up and accompany him to recite sutras. No, read books. He felt that his days would be even happier. The green hills were far away, and the clouds were floating lightly. It was already May, and the weather was gradually getting hotter. At noon, the scorching sun would be in the sky, and the sunlight spared no effort to shine on the earth, causing wisps of steam to rise. The Chow family party followed the Crown Prince and Xiao Mu on a scenic tour, stopping here and there. After nearly half a month's time, they finally arrived 5 kilometers away from the outskirts of Dragon Flame City. Qiao San excitedly peeked his little face out of the carriage curtains and looked around curiously. He pointed at the tall gate in front of them and exclaimed, "I see the words Dragon Flame City." This child. Wei Ziqin helplessly glanced at her son and hurriedly reached out to pull Qiao Sen's little body back. "Sit properly. Don't just sit there all day without a proper posture." "Mom, you're always talking about me." Qiao Sen pouted and muttered. Jolin chuckled. "You're like a frisky monkey. If your mother doesn't scold you, who else would she scold?" She called out to her younger brother. She turned her head and saw the little monk holding a vegetable bun and gnawing on it. The bun was very big, and only a pair of black eyes could be seen from behind the bun. He looked a little funny. Jolin couldn't help but reach out and rub his little bald head. He laughed and said, "Little monk, why are you so interesting?" "Don't take any interest in this little monk." The little monk hurriedly slapped Jolin's hand away and touched his bald head. He said righteously, "This little monk is a person who is devoted to Buddhism. Once I enter the temple, I will be a monk for life." His hand that was holding the vegetable buns was still stained with a lot of grease. When he touched his head, all the grease was smeared on his little head. He immediately jumped up and jumped off the carriage with a cry, giving everyone a fright. Fortunately, the carriage was already in a stopped state, so nothing happened. The little monk shouted, "Benefactress, benefactress." All the way, he hurriedly ran toward the carriage in front of them. Auber had just gotten off the carriage with Emolienne when she heard the demonic voice shouting all the way over. Auber couldn't help but hold her forehead. Immediately, the figure of the little monk appeared in her line of sight. "Benefactress." The little monk immediately rushed to Auber and hugged her thigh. Chapter 3483. The little fellow called out, "Female benefactor, female benefactor, this little monk's head is oily, it's uncomfortable." Auber was speechless. Emolienne snickered and pulled that little monk down from Qiao Qiao's lap. He swayed the little monk in his hand as he asked with a spurious smile, "Benefactress's husband will help you wipe your head?" "No." The little monk immediately rejected her without giving her any face. "I want female benefactor." As they spoke, the city gates suddenly opened and a troop of cavalry rushed out. The leader was a young general dressed in battle armor. His expression was solemn and stern. Hundreds of cavalry quickly arrived beside the group. The leading general hurriedly pulled on the reins and jumped off his horse. He strode forward and cupped his hands in greeting. This general, Zhongli Ping, greets Crown Prince and Crown Princess. Prince Emo looked deeply at the young general in front of him and nodded. "Where did little General Zhongli go?" "In reply to your highness." Zhongli Ping said very respectfully, "This general is following His Majesty's orders to go to the 10-mile slope to receive a divine pill refiner." Upon hearing this, Qiao Mu sized him up. Zhongli Ping, great General Zhong Li's son? Previously, at grandfather's banquet, this great General Zhong Li was clearly forced by the Crown Prince to go to His Majesty and hand over his resignation letter. Why was his son still working for His Majesty in the imperial court? Zhong Li's residence had secretly accumulated many powerful divine realm cultivators deep in the mountains and forests. How could His Majesty tolerate such a person with ulterior motives? Impossible. Then what was the reason that Zhongli Ping was still in the imperial court? Could it be that it had something to do with this divine pill refiner that he was about to receive? Emolienne gazed deeply at Zhong Liping, inwardly admiring this Zhong Liping's current tranquil appearance. Logically speaking, Prince Mo had forced Zhong Li's family into such a state. When Zhong Liping saw him this time, he should have the look of someone who had met an enemy with eyes filled with hatred. However, this brat did not show any emotion. He was actually able to keep his composure. "Oh, I wonder which divine grade alchemist it is?" Emolienne asked. Zhong Liping cupped his hands again and said respectfully, "Reporting to your highness, this general's distant cousin, Shawnee Su, cousin Sean." Emolienne frowned slightly. "Oh." However, he didn't know that the extremely famous young divine grade alchemist actually had such a relationship with the Zhongli clan. Distant cousin? Emolien nodded. Go ahead. Yes, Your Highness. Zhong Liping's performance was pretty good. From the beginning to the end, he didn't show any disrespect to the Crown Princess. Hearing that His Highness was letting them go, he respectfully bowed to the couple. Then, he waved his hand and led the 100-man team forward. This person, Zhong Liping, does have some of his father's awe-inspiring presence. Emolien commented dryly. It was just that the wives he married were all so stupid. They were all troublemakers who couldn't help. Arbor tilted his little head and took out a clean handkerchief. He carefully wiped the oil stains on little Baldy's head and asked, "Who is Shan Isu?" Emolien smiled. Shan Isu is a rather famous divine-grade alchemist in the 3 continents. She is only 28 years old now. 3 years ago, she entered the divine-grade alchemist sect. Sir Jojo made an "oh" sound and didn't say anything else. Emolien lowered his head to look at his little emperor and pulled her into his embrace. Chapter 3484. His action was so sudden that he brought the little monk, who was in Lady Chow Chow's hands, into his bosom. Jojo is much more formidable than her. Crown Prince Lien felt that he needed to let his wife know that in his heart, no formidable pill refiner could compare to his little emperor. Arbor cast a glance at him and didn't bother to speak. Squeezed between the two of them, the little Baldy grumbled unhappily, Benefactress's husband, can you two not squeeze this little monk? This little monk still has oil on his head. Aren't we wiping it for you?" Arbor grumpily cupped his little round head and wiped it a few more times. "Okay, it's out of oil." The little monk raised his hand to rub his head before nodding in satisfaction. "Benefactress, this little monk needs to wash his hair properly tonight." Arbor. Emolien couldn't help but laugh out loud. "What are you washing your hair for? With your bald head and photon brain, you just need to wipe it with a rag every day." Sir Jojo pursed his lips in amusement. He reached out to pick up the little monk, whose face was puffed up like a bun, and quickly walked to the side of the carriage before jumping onto it. The group successfully passed through Dragon Flame City's checkpoint. Arbor took her parents and family to a garden-style residence on Changle North Street. This residence was one of the 5 properties she had won from Mu Rochuan during her grandfather's birthday banquet. It was a space ring she had won from her. The space ring just happened to store some talisman puppets and elixir pills, which she handed to little Six Zhang and the huge bear squad. This residence was just right for her parents and family to live in. It was also close to her Kai Dai Pavilion and precious painting workshop. Changle Main Street was also a bustling area where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. Even this medium-sized garden-style residence located here was also worth a lot. The Chow family's arrival was sudden. Fortunately, they had hired someone to clean this residence for a long time, so the environment was relatively clean. This residence was still smaller than the Marquis of Jeyuan's estate that they used to live in, but it was enough for a family to live in. The courtyard was also exquisitely renovated. There were pavilions, terraces, pavilions, and playhouses. The environment looked very comfortable and elegant. The family moved into the new residence and naturally took some time to tidy up. Wei Ziqin saw that the sky was gradually darkening and urged her daughter to quickly return to the palace with the crown prince to rest. Anyway, it wouldn't be good to tidy it up in a day or two. They planned to stay here first and tidy it up slowly later. When he was free, he would go to the broker house and buy 2 servants, and everything would be on the right track. Not long after the young couple returned to the Eastern Palace, a young eunuch hurriedly came to deliver a message, saying that His Majesty urgently summoned the Crown Prince for an audience. Emolien reluctantly let go of his wife and went to report to his father's extreme time hall. Arbor, on the other hand, took a combat bath. He was so tired that he lay on the bed and rolled around. The past few days had been really thrilling. Fortunately, this half a month of sightseeing had soothed his anxious heart quite a bit. Arbor lay on the bed, thinking that he might be able to receive the 100,000 blank jade slips tomorrow. He also had to go to Fish Orchid Planet to draw talismans. Oh, recently, his realm had stabilized quite a bit. It was time to advance to the next level. As he thought about it, he fell asleep in a daze. In the middle of the night, he suddenly woke up with a start. He reached out to touch the empty and cold bedding beside him. He rolled over and sat up, his little face immediately puffing up. Jojo's lotus was gone. Chapter 3485. Sir Jojo jumped down and put on a coat. Kai Xiu, who heard the noise at the door, carefully pushed open the door and walked in. Abba was stunned and casually asked, "Why aren't you sleeping?" Kai Xiu heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly walked up and said in a low voice, "Crown Princess, why did you suddenly wake up?" "Lien is gone." Sir Jojo muttered unhappily. Kai Xiu couldn't help but pursed her lips and chuckled. Crown Prince was called to the study by His Majesty. "Crown Princess, have you forgotten? What time was it already?" There were so many things to discuss. Abba's pair of round almond eyes couldn't help but slightly narrowed. "You're saying that after His Majesty called Crown Prince over, he didn't let him come back?" Kai Xiu coughed lightly. His Highness sent someone to pass the message back. "But he saw that Crown Princess was asleep yesterday, so he didn't disturb you. Crown Prince was entrusted by His Majesty to go to the 10-mile slope to help little General Zhong Li pick up a divine-grade pill master." Abba couldn't help but be startled, following which a trace of anger surged in her eyes. Pick up someone in the middle of the night? Didn't that Zhong Li Ping already left the city in the evening to pick up that pill master called Shan Yi Su? Could it be that he waited until the middle of the night and still hadn't come back? What was it? This person was brought to the Sea of Forgetfulness, right? Was there such a long journey? Seeing that the little Crown Princess was angry, Kai Xiu hurriedly said in a gentle voice, "Seems like something happened at the 10-mile slope. That pill master and little General Zhong Li were blocked by a group of bandits at the 10-mile slope and couldn't come out." "Bandits?" Abba seemed to have heard a big joke and couldn't help but raise her voice slightly. "These bandits are really quite interesting. They came all the way from Qingyu border city and didn't even bump into a single bandit. They also passed through the 10-mile slope and didn't bump into anything. Once this pill master passed through, he was immediately surrounded by bandits. It turned out that bandits also treated people well. At this time, Kai Xiu had already helped Abba put on his clothes and tidy them up properly. Seeing the little Crown Princess about to go out with her long hair, she hurriedly pulled her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "This servant will help you tidy up your hair a little." "Crown Princess, are you going to the 10-mile slope now?" "From what I can see, it's almost dawn. I'm afraid that the Crown Prince and General Zhong Li will be back soon. Why don't we wait a little longer?" Jojo's expression was a little uncertain. Just as she pushed open the door, she saw Tong, who was guarding the door, turn around and bow to her. At this time, the sky was just beginning to brighten. The red sun in the east had not completely jumped out of the horizon. Only a small part of its head was exposed, reflecting a touch of sunset on the horizon. Sir Jojo's expression was unperturbed. He clasped his hands behind his back and asked crisply, "Where's Lotus? He's not back yet? This guy is really looking down on the little emperor more and more. He actually dared to stay out all night without saying a word." Tong laughed embarrassedly and hurriedly said, "His Highness the Crown Prince has just sent a message back. He will definitely be back in the palace in an hour." Jojo puffed up his little face and heavily snorted. He turned around and pattered towards the direction of the main hall. Kai Xiu glanced at Tong and gave him a look that said, "Let His Highness fend for himself." She hurriedly followed the little Crown Princess' footsteps. Until Abba finished a tasteless breakfast, she found that the guy who said he would be back in an hour was still nowhere to be seen. She was furious. Chapter 3486. She packed a small bag, carried a pile of things, and called for someone to send her back to the Chow residence on Changle North Street. When Sir Jojo arrived, the whole family had just woken up and were having breakfast in the dining room. When they heard that Jojo was back, they hurriedly ran out to welcome her. They saw the little girl standing in the middle of the courtyard under the bright morning sun.
Her little face was tense as she ordered the accompanying servants to move boxes of things inside. Wei Ziqin was delighted when she saw her. She went forward and hugged her daughter. "My good daughter, why are you here so early in the morning? Didn't I tell you to rest well?" "Mother, I'm moving back to stay for a few days." Sir Jojo's words made everyone look at each other in dismay. Miss Chow asked the servants to carry the boxes to her courtyard. When they came back yesterday, they had already divided the courtyards. Her Pear Blossom courtyard was next to her parents' courtyard. It was slightly smaller, but it was the most exquisite courtyard in the entire residence. Wei Ziqin blinked and turned to look at her husband. They both faintly felt that the little girl seemed to be angry. What happened? Why didn't they see little Mo? Qiao Zhongbong winked at his wife, meaning that she should hurry over and ask her daughter what happened. Wei Ziqin glanced at him and then went forward to hold Auber's little hand. She asked with a smile, "Jojo, you can stay as long as you want as long as you want. You can stay as long as you want, but where is Xiao Mo? Why didn't he come back with you?" "He didn't come back last night." Auber was furious. "He went to pick up a woman and didn't come back to sleep the whole night. He said he would be back in an hour, but Jojo waited until breakfast was cold. I didn't see him." "What?" Everyone in the Chow residence, including second uncle and little Huzi, couldn't help but shout. This little Mo was too unreliable. How could he leave Jojo at home just to pick up another woman? What a bastard! Qiao Zhongbong and Qiao Zhongxing were furious. "Where is he? Second uncle, let's find him and beat him up." As second uncle Qiao said the word theory, his eyes clearly revealed that he wanted to beat classmate Xiaomao up. Sir Jojo pursed his lips and snorted. "Who knows where he is now?" After saying that, she angrily ordered people to move the things into her Pear Blossom courtyard. She angrily waited for a while. When it was almost noon, she only received a message from Lai Tong, who was trembling with fear. His Highness said that he would be back later and asked the Crown Princess to have lunch first. Xiao Mu promptly shut the person outside with a bang before entering Paradise Planet in a flash. Poor Prince Mo rushed to the Chow family in the afternoon. As soon as he returned to the Eastern Palace, he found out that the young Crown Princess had been angered and returned to her maiden home. He secretly complained incessantly and hurriedly rushed to the Chow family without stopping. In the end, he was almost given the cold shoulder. Fortunately, his mother-in-law truly pitied this poor thing and turned a blind eye. She had Kai Xiu open the back door and secretly let him in. Amolien went to the Pear Blossom courtyard and found that Jojo wasn't there at all. She immediately knew that this little guy must have been angered back to Paradise Planet and might have gone into closed-door cultivation. This fellow complained incessantly and cursed his unreliable father and 18 generations of ancestors in his heart. If his father hadn't insisted on discussing the Greyfield village matter with him, how could he have delayed coming back to see his wife until so late? See, his precious little wife was unhappy. Chapter 3487. This fellow's heart was actually in a mess. He didn't know what exactly his wife was angry about. However, he had a strong desire to live. As long as his wife was angry, it was all his fault. Since he wanted to enter Paradise Planet, he had to admit his mistake to his wife. In the end, he summoned Little Tree, but there was no response. She started to panic a little. Oh no, his wife was really angry this time. She must have told Little Tree not to bring him into Paradise Planet. Mo Lien couldn't come up with a solution no matter how he thought about it, so he could only ruthlessly threaten the sapling. After coaxing and pestering for a long time, he finally entered. Just as he entered Paradise Planet, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's figure flashed and he came to his side with a smile. He looked like he was watching a good show. What's wrong? Did you make the little girl angry? Where's my Jojo? Ha! The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal rolled his eyes. Let me tell you, Jojo is really angry this time. You didn't come home last night. The situation is very serious. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal chuckled as he followed behind him. Jojo doesn't want to see you anymore. Mo Lien turned to look at him.
Jojo went into seclusion to cultivate. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal raised his head smugly. You want to see her? That depends on whether our Jojo is happy to see you. Emolienne really wanted to slap this guy, but she controlled herself. She turned and dashed in the direction of the bamboo house. Jojo. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal blocked him with his small fan. Hey, I already said that Jojo went to cultivate. Don't tell me you want to disturb her? Alright. Seeing how pitiful you are, I'll show you the way. What about you? Wait here obediently for our Chow Chow. After you see Jojo, you must behave properly. Emolienne glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. After the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal finished his long-winded speech, he turned around and realized that Emolienne had already disappeared without a trace. Humph, if you don't listen to what I have to say, you deserve to be rejected by Jojo. Arbor was sitting on a small bed in the bamboo house, cultivating by himself with the door closed. When she opened her eyes, a glimmer of light entered her eyes. Subconsciously, he used his divine sense to check his meridians and found that his 9 branch meridians were now filled with spiritual power like streams. She raised her hand and quickly shot out a stream of spiritual energy. That stream of water spiritual energy revealed a dense chill. It directly turned into an icicle in front of her, hanging upside down in front of her eyes. When Emolienne pushed the door open, she saw the little fellow standing under the sharp icicle hanging from the ceiling, looking up at the icicle. The bright white light contrasted with a cold glint in the depths of her eyes, giving Crown Prince Emo a bad premonition at once. He hurried to his wife's side in a flash. Just as he was about to reach out to hug her, she dodged him. Emolienne was a little anxious at once. He hurried to her side again, reached out, and hurriedly carried the little fellow who was bristling with anger. He cried out repeatedly, "Wife, hubby admits his mistake. Wife, I was wrong. Hubby shouldn't have stayed out all night and shouldn't have let you stay in the cold bed. Punish me to kiss you as many times as you like." Arbor glanced at him, looking at him expressionlessly. "Get lost." Emolienne, Jojo, it's because something happened at the last minute and Imperial Father kept me here to talk about it for a long time. Ask me, I'll confess to anything you ask. Chapter 3488. The man tilted his head and rubbed it against the top of her head. Jojo, I won't hide anything from you. Ask me anything you want to know. Last night, because of that Sue something, you stayed out all night and didn't come back at all. This was unbearable. Chow Mu's small face was taut as she roared at him in anger out of humiliation. Emolienne blinked his eyes and immediately understood. His wifey was probably angry because of this unlined garment. Because he didn't come back at night, his little wife mistakenly thought that he had delayed coming back to sleep because of the Sue thing. He hurriedly shook his head and raised a hand above his head as he swore, "I swear, Jojo, I didn't stay out all night because of her." Then Kai Xiu said that you went to pick her up? Yes. Emolienne didn't dare to hide anything at this time and hurriedly soothed his little wife's anger. He nodded and said, "It's true that I helped pick her up, but after I came back, I stayed in the palace and was kept in the study by Imperial Father." Kai Xiu. Prince Emo turned around and roared as usual. Kai Xiu, this girl, how did she pass on the message? Look at how angry his wife was. Then he realized. This wasn't the Eastern Palace at all. This was Paradise Planet. Where did Kai Xiu come from? Don't you dare yell at Kai Xiu. The little fellow slapped his hand away in annoyance, her almond eyes bulging. What's the matter? Your father still wants to keep you for the night. What's there to discuss? Emolienne didn't dare to laugh, but the little wife in front of him was fuming and trying hard to maintain her stoic expression. She was really a little adorable. This husband swears. I really stayed in the palace. Emolienne hurriedly explained. Stubborn Chow, Wu Xiaoyin, Imperial Censor Wang, and the other court officials are also in the discussion. I can call them all over. Arbor snorted, the little flame in her heart subsiding a few inches. What happened? Your father is really unreliable.
She had just returned to the Eastern Palace, and yet another trouble had come. It was as if he was the only one in the world who could do the job.
Wouldn't Lien die of exhaustion?
Initially, he thought that the emperor was a reliable person, but from the looks of it, he was no different from old Wang of the Mo kingdom.
Both of them liked to enslave their sons. Mo Lien heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that his wife's anger had subsided. He hugged her tightly and lowered his head to kiss her. Wife, you don't know how annoying our father is. When something happened in Greyfield Village, the first person he thought of was me. He also asked me to go to the village to settle some matters. He said that he wants me to leave tomorrow.
What?
Xiao Mu roared, unable to remain calm. Her Lien had just returned to the capital. Why did he have to go out on a mission again? I already said that I don't want to go, but my father kept glaring at me as if he expected better from me.
He even nagged all day long, saying that a man should aspire to travel far and not follow his wife around and fool around with you all day long.
I'm not fooling around. My Jojo isn't fooling around at all. The two spoke at the same time, then looked at each other. Arbor finally couldn't hold back her laughter. She turned her little head and snorted softly. Mo Lien saw that his little wife was finally smiling. He quickly reached out to pull her over and sat down on the bamboo stool beside him. Jojo, there was a large-scale zombie attack in Greyfield Village. It happened a few days ago, and it's quite serious. Chapter 3489. The day after tomorrow, I'll really go to Grey Ping Village. I'll go too. Our wedding date is set for the 6th of June. It's less than a month away. Mo Lien rubbed her head gloomily. You have to stay. You have to prepare the wedding dress and jewelry as soon as possible. Also, the Ministry of Rites will often bring over some things that need to be added for you to look over. Arbor frowned. Thinking that this was indeed the case, she couldn't help but nod slightly. All right then. Thinking that Jojo's Lotus was going to leave Dragon Flame City for a while, the little fellow's mood instantly turned sour. However, the matter of the corpse puppet could not be delayed. She did not continue to obstruct him, but her eyes were a little listless. Whenever Mo Lien spoke, she would somewhat ignore him. Mo Lien couldn't help but find it amusing. Then, he pulled her into his arms and said softly, Jojo, you have to think of me. Do you know? When I think of leaving the capital the day after tomorrow and being separated from you for a period of time, I feel especially bad. Arbor didn't say anything. She just glanced at him listlessly. But don't worry. I'll definitely rush back by June at the latest. Definitely. Arbor turned her head and raised her hand to wrap around his neck. She asked in a muffled voice. So from midnight until morning last night, you've been in the study discussing this matter with the courtiers? About the corpse puppet in Grey Ping Village? Mo Lien nodded. Arbor immediately reached out to cover his eyes. You didn't sleep the whole night. Mo Lien smiled slightly and gently pulled her little hand down. He gazed deeply at her, as if wanting to imprint her exquisite features in the depths of his heart. Jojo, nothing is more important than you. You have to stay here well. You have to make me feel at ease, okay? Arbor glanced at him and said in a muffled voice, What can happen to me? You, on the other hand, have gone to such a dangerous place. Don't mess around in everything. I'll make more elixirs for you tomorrow. Bring them along. All right. Is the news from Greyfield Village reliable? Arbor suddenly asked. Mo Lien nodded. Reliable. The news was brought back by that alchemist. She came from Greyfield Village. Since that place was surrounded by a large number of zombies, how does she get to the capital safely? Arbor asked suspiciously. Didn't you say that she was surrounded by bandits at Shirley Slope? Arbor snorted. If they could break out of the encirclement of a large group of zombies, how could a few hundred bandits be a problem for them? Yes, this matter is also quite suspicious. Mo Lien also nodded, but she couldn't help but complain in her heart. But I've already sent people to investigate. I won't be able to receive any news in a short period of time.
Emolienne looked at her and smiled. Jojo is right. An expert alchemist who came out of a nest of zombies doesn't look like someone who would be surrounded by bandits. So they were luring you over yesterday?
Arbor said coldly. Yesterday, didn't that Zhong Liping go to pick up that alchemist? Why did he encounter bandits at Shirley Slope?
The bandits at Shirley Slope were there.
They didn't rob us when they saw our carriage pass by.
Oh, when they saw us pass by, they suddenly jumped out to surround us and rob us?
Moreover, Zhong Liping brought a few hundred people yesterday. They couldn't even take down a small bandit nest, so why did they have to call you over? Chapter 3490. No matter how you look at it, it's comical.
Arbor concluded. Prince Mo could only nod at his wife's outburst, agreeing that what she said made sense.
I don't like that pill refiner, Sir Jojo said angrily.
I feel that she's purely looking for trouble.
Emolienne's eyes brightened, and he immediately hugged his wifey as he cheerfully said, Chow chow, chow chow, don't worry. Even if that pill refiner's pill refining skills are better than yours for the time being, hubby still won't fancy her. His Jojo cared about him more and more. He was happy.
Arbor glared at him unhappily.
Do you think I'm jealous of her?
She only felt that this woman's motives weren't pure.
Although they hadn't met yet, why did she feel that this woman was a bit pretentious?
She brought the news of Greyfield Village to the Emperor so that she could show off her skills in front of the Emperor. How was being able to enter and exit a zombie lair unscathed all by herself not a skill?
But she pretended to be weak and asked for help at the 10-mile slope. She even wanted Jojo's lotus to save her? No matter how he looked at it, he didn't like it. Was she pretending to be strong or weak?
What a contradictory woman.
He couldn't understand her. Emolienne kissed his wife hard and said with a grin, Who does my wife need to be jealous of? My wife is the best.
Arbor glanced at him as if looking at an idiot.
She snorted and said, You're not hiding anything from me, right? Emolienne shook his head, but he kept muttering in his heart. Heavens! His wife's brain really wasn't for show. She was really smart. She could guess the whole story just by looking at the signs. She was so smart that it made him happy and distressed. Actually, when Emolienne arrived at the 10-mile slope, he knew at first glance that the pill refiner had teamed up with Zhong Liping to scheme against him. With their abilities, it was impossible for them to be trapped by a mere 100 bandits in a place like the 10-mile slope. She was only putting on such an act to lure him into a trap and meet him first. How could the Crown Prince take the bait?
Thinking that she was being pretentious, the Crown Prince immediately brought his men back to the palace. Therefore, other than this point, Emolienne didn't hide anything else from Chow Chow. He had indeed reached the 10-mile slope, but he immediately returned to the palace within 3 minutes. However, he was left in the study by the great Emperor to discuss matters until dawn.
Wife, don't think so much in the future, okay? Hubby is here for everything.
Emolienne stood up with her in his arms, and the two walked out of the bamboo building. At the same time, he came face to face with the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who was waving a small fan, immediately glared at Emolienne. He pointed at Emolienne with his fan and shouted in a huff, Chow Chow, why are you paying attention to him so quickly? I was still thinking about how to leave this brat hanging for half a day. Emolienne instantly glared at him in annoyance. She pulled Jojo's little hand and said, Jojo, don't listen to his slander. Arbor tugged at his little hand, but failed to pull it out of Emolienne's grasp. He simply raised his hand and swiped at the air in front of him. In the halo of his demonic eyes, the scenery faded and the scene at the Chow residence's main entrance appeared. A gorgeously dressed woman walked out of the carriage with the help of someone. She raised her head and looked at the Chow residence's lintel. A cold smile flashed across her eyes. Arbor looked at the figure in the halo. She looks a little familiar. Of course she looks familiar. My Jojo, on the day of your grandfather's birthday banquet, didn't you release a debt?
There, it's that steward Lee from the Pink House. She's here now. Chapter 3491. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who was enjoying the show, waved his little fan and blinked his beautiful eyes, smiling happily. Jojo, how do you plan to deal with them? Do you need my help? He was so bored that he wanted to help Jojo beat them up. Arbor retracted the light from his demonic eyes and glanced at the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, then at Emolien. He asked with a puzzled expression, "When did I owe them a debt?" The two of them. The little fellow looked confused. Why was it so funny? It looked like this fellow had completely forgotten about the incident with Steward Lee of the Pink House. Jojo, 5% for every 2 hours. Emolien reminded him in amusement. Arbor's brain finally connected. His eyes lit up and he nodded repeatedly. Oh, right, it's that big idiot. Emolien and Hu Jinchen exchanged a look and almost burst out laughing. Hearing this, they nodded and said, right, it's that big idiot. Arbor and the two of them left the galaxy together and pushed open the door with small steps. Wei Ziqin, Qiao Zhongbang, and the others were drinking tea in the little garden and staring at their daughter's door. The moment she saw her, Wei Ziqin hurriedly stood up to greet her. Jojo. Second Uncle Qiao also jumped up and ran quickly to Emolien. Little Emo, when did you come in? This fellow. Didn't the main and second doors close for him? He must have climbed over the wall to get in. Emolien glanced at Wei Ziqin pitifully and complained, Mother. Second uncle won't let me in. Wei Ziqin patted his hand in amusement. All right, second uncle, Jojo must be fine now. Look. As she spoke, she gestured angrily in Arbor's direction. Second Uncle Qiao looked and indeed, Sir Jojo's expression seemed much better. It seemed like that stinking brat had coaxed his little niece back. Humph. Only then did second uncle drop the subject. At this moment, Jolin hurried over from the other end of the garden path. When he saw everyone, he exclaimed, Father, father. Someone is coming. The Qiao family members looked at each other. Who's here? Qiao Zhongbang asked suspiciously. After all, their family had just settled down in this house yesterday. On the divine land, they had no relatives or friends. Who could be so well informed? They had just moved into the mansion yesterday, and someone had already come knocking on their door today? It's all right, father. He's here for me. Arbor said faintly and took the lead to walk towards the gate of the house. Jolin hurriedly caught up with her sister's footsteps and asked curiously, Sister, I see that those people's faces are very ugly, as if someone owes them millions of spirit coins. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal could not help but laugh. It's not someone who owes them money, it's them who owes my Jojo money. How much did you owe in the past 20 days? 5 cents every 2 hours. That's 24 hours a day. Let's count it as 25 days now. I don't even know how much I owe. How much did they lend me? Arbor herself could not remember. 1 million. When Arbor heard this, he was instantly displeased. Why is it only 1 million? 5 cents every 2 hours. 20 days isn't that much. Everyone. Arbor's group entered the hall in a grandiose manner and saw a woman with heavy makeup sitting there with a displeased expression. Steward Lee furtively shrunk his neck and pulled up his sleeves, standing behind the woman with an aged face. Chapter 3492. Seeing that the Crown Princess had brought people in, he immediately jumped up as if he had been electrocuted and shouted, Grand Crown Princess! Crown Princess! Arbor glanced at him and her gaze fell on the woman with heavy makeup. Who are you? The woman in front of her was gorgeously dressed. She wore a strapless long dress that outlined her good figure. She wore a large string of sandalwood beads on her hand and a mole at the corner of her mouth, which ruined her good color. Time had already left its mark on her face. Although Sun Yang was still attractive in her middle age, she was no longer as delicate as a young girl. Wearing this peach-colored long dress naturally didn't add any points to her looks.
Instead, it seemed unbearably gaudy. Yin Yang stood up and curtsied to Qiao Mu, Emolien, and the others in a well-behaved manner. Afterwards, she put on a nonchalant expression and said faintly, "Why does the Crown Prince Consort have to pretend not to recognize us?
Haven't you been sending people to the pink brothel to remind us to pay our debts?"
"It's just that the Crown Princess has been gone for more than 20 days.
We can't pay our debts, even if we want to."
It was only then that Xiao Mu recalled that before she left, she had indeed sent someone to remind this pink house's manager not to forget his debt to her from time to time.
If she didn't pay up, Sir Jojo definitely wouldn't let it go. When the time came, destroying her pink house would be a light punishment.
Arbor nodded. Her figure spun and she sat down at the head of the table.
Kai Xiu was very perceptive.
She walked forward and handed a debt note to the young Crown Princess.
Then she bowed and left. Arbor lowered her head and glanced at the debt note. She nodded and looked at Yin Yang. "You're the lady boss of the pink house?"
"I don't dare to be the lady boss."
"If you're not the lady boss, then why are you looking for me?"
Arbor interrupted her self-deprecating words and said impatiently, "I have to find your lady boss to settle this matter. You small fries don't come looking for this Crown Princess to talk nonsense."
Everyone was speechless. Yin Yang held her breath in her chest as the veins on her forehead throbbed. She hurriedly said, "Yes, I'm the lady boss of the pink house."
"You're the lady boss, and you're saying that you don't dare to accept it?" the little Crown Princess said unhappily.
"You're lying. This Crown Princess doesn't like to beat around the bush.
If you have something to say, just say it.
F***ck,
I don't dare. I was just being polite. You.
Why is it so tiring to talk to you?"
For the first time in her life, Yin Yang, who had always been smooth and sly, had been angered by a little girl. Everyone could not help but look at her sympathetically, feeling that she was a little pitiful.
"Since you're the lady boss, then let's cut the crap."
Arbor slammed the note on the table.
30 million spirit coins. Pay it.
3. 30 million.
Steward Lee's cries were like an old rooster whose neck was being squeezed.
His raised voice was practically piercing through the roof. Qiao Mu swept him a displeased glance. "What gall, you actually dare to yell at this Crown Prince Consort?"
Steward Lee immediately looked like a defeated rooster.
He drooped his head and cried out pitifully, "Crown Princess, this lowly one didn't do it on purpose. This lowly one, it's just too shocking."
He had a long face. If crying could solve the problem, he was willing to cry until the sky turned dark. Arbor looked at him impatiently.
A grown man being so long-winded.
Scram to the side. Chapter 3493.
Don't you see that this Crown Princess is talking to your lady boss?
Arbor glanced at Manager Lee in annoyance, then turned to Yin Yang and asked indifferently, "How is it?" "You should know that the time it takes for an incense stick to burn has already passed when I was talking to you. According to the calculation of 5% interest for every 2 hours, you have to pay another sum of interest now."
Yin Yang had lived for so many years and had interacted with all kinds of people, but she had never been as sullen as she was today. This little girl's words were really infuriating. She simply had the urge to not say a single word to her. Arbor glanced at her and said unhappily, "What's with that look?" Every time these people spoke a few words to Jojo, they would look very indignant and too lazy to continue talking to Jojo.
If they didn't want to talk, then they wouldn't talk. Then they would chase them away and let them owe more money.
Once they had accumulated 100 million in debt, they would directly go to her door and take over her pink building.
"Kai Xiu, Kai Chi, see the guest out."
"Yes, Crown Princess."
Kai Xiu hurriedly walked over with Kai Chi.
She faintly said to Yin Yang, "Lady boss, please." Yin Yang was so angry that her nose was about to become crooked.
It was Manager Lee who hurriedly said in a low voice, "Yin Yang, the longer we owe that debt, the more it will increase." Yin Yong fiercely glared at Manager Lee a few times. If it weren't for this guy who foolishly signed that debt, how could he have fallen into such a state? If it weren't for the fact that this guy still had some use for the pink building, she would have chased this guy out long ago and let him fend for himself while he paid the debt himself. Yin Yong took a deep breath, then smiled mockingly at Arbor and said, "Crown Princess, if you have something to say, let's talk nicely. We're not people who don't pay back debts. It's just that your 5% interest, even if it's calculated based on 25 days, isn't right. It's doubled, okay? Husband." Arbor turned to look at her husband. The Crown Prince's mouth twitched, and he coughed lightly. With a straight face, he said sternly, "What do you mean? Are you saying that my Crown Princess can't even do accounting?" Yin Yong couldn't help but want to howl like a wolf. That was because the Crown Princess couldn't calculate the accounts properly, all right? However, she did not dare to contradict the Crown Prince, so she quickly smiled and said, "This commoner did not mean that. The Crown Princess is extremely intelligent. Naturally, she can calculate the accounts clearly. Today, His Highness the Crown Prince was here to support this little Crown Princess. It seemed that she had no choice but to accept this humiliation." Yin Yong took a deep breath and nodded, admitting defeat. "Manager Lee, give the spirit coin card to the Crown Princess." With a long face, Manager Lee walked to the front of the Crown Princess and bowed as he handed over a spirit coin card. "Crown Princess, the interest plus the principal amount is a total of 31 million spirit coins. It's all in here." The little Crown Princess glanced sideways, and Kai Xiu immediately understood. She stepped forward and took the spirit coin card. After checking the amount, she nodded slightly at the little Crown Princess. After unexpectedly receiving 30 million spirit coins, the young Crown Prince consort's mood immediately improved. However, there was still no expression on her little face. She faintly glanced at Yin Yong and said coldly, "Give me the list of Hua clan's debts." Yin Yong was stunned, and her eyes could not help but reveal anger. "Crown Princess, this is too unkind of you. That 30 million was already equivalent to daylight robbery." Chapter 3494. She didn't expect that the Crown Princess still didn't plan on letting them off. Could it be that she wanted to wipe out the 60 million debt of the Mu family's fifth branch's wife, Hua Nei? How could there be such a good thing in this world? Yin Yang had only taken out 30 million spirit coins, so how long would it take for her to earn it back? Now, the Crown Princess wanted to wipe out the 60 million debt with a single sentence? That was simply a lunatic's ravings. "Husband." Sir Jojo turned to look at Mo Lien in a huff. Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she maintained a serious expression and continued to help the villain do evil. "Go. Invite the capital governor over for this highness. The imperial court has already explicitly prohibited the use of stamp money. This pink house knowingly violated the law. It's simply unforgivable. Go invite the capital governor over and have him handle this matter." Yin Yang was so angry that her nose kept twitching, and she almost spat out a mouthful of blood from her chest. Good, you high and mighty children of influential families. Right and wrong, black and white, you can twist things back and forth, but this is how you humiliate people. Previously, the Crown Princess charged her 30 million spirit coins for a 2-hour period of 5% interest. Could it be that it wasn't a usurious stamp money? Now that it was her turn, she was being unreasonable in every way. This was simply preposterous. Arbor glanced at Yin Yang, who was so angry that her hair was standing on end, and lightly harumphed. It seems that some people simply won't shed tears until they see the coffin. Mo Lien nodded and gave Hui Feng, who was standing on the side, a look. Hui Feng immediately cupped his hands in acknowledgement and turned to walk out the door. "Wait." Yin Yang hastily stood up and shouted, "Wait, wait." She was so anxious that her voice trembled slightly. Arbor turned to glance at her and said indifferently, "What? Did Lady Boss change her mind?" Yin Yang gritted her teeth and clenched her fists in her sleeves. If she could, she really wanted to pounce over and bite this little Crown Princess. She was simply a hateful person. Arbor saw that her expression was filled with resentment, but she did not dare to do anything to him. He could not help but secretly laugh in his heart. In all these years, Yin Yang had never suffered a loss. Unfortunately, she had bumped into an iron plate like Jojo. She was in for it. Yin Yang took a deep breath and forced a smile. However, the smile on her face was even uglier than crying. "Manager Lee," Yin Yang called out. The cold sweat on Steward Lee's forehead almost dripped down. He hurriedly stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Yin Yang. Find the note of the fifth wife's debt." Manager Lee immediately cried out with a long face. "But Yin Yang, the fifth madam owes us more than 60 million spirit coins. This debt isn't a small amount. The mistress of the fifth branch has paid more than 20 million spirit coins, right?" Arbor's expression was indifferent as he said, "If that's the case, then fine. Husband, let's call stubborn Chow over and let him settle this case." Yin Yang inwardly gnashed her teeth. The common people did not fight with the rich, and the rich did not fight with the officials. This had been the case since ancient times. She naturally knew that if the capital magistrate was really invited, with the attitude of this black-hearted couple in front of her, they would probably urge the capital magistrate to convict her of a felony. At that time, not to mention that 60 million spirit coins would disappear without a trace, even the pink brothel that she had been operating for many years would probably be lost. Although the pink brothel was merely one of her businesses in the entire Jade Tripod City, it was still one of her businesses. Chapter 3495. However, if the pink brothel that was so well managed was destroyed by the Crown Prince and his wife just like that, Yin Yang wouldn't be able to sit still. Yin Yang took a deep breath and hastily put on a smiling face. She chuckled and said, "Crown Princess, there's no need to be angry. It's not that this commoner isn't willing, it's just that fifth madam's debt has been owed for so long that it'll take some time to find it. Steward Lee, why haven't you brought fifth madam's debt note yet?" Steward Lee hastily went back to retrieve the note with a long face. However, he still couldn't figure out what was going on. He clearly came today to find the Crown Princess to properly reason with her, so how did he end up with Madame Hua's 60 million yuan debt? It was simply inexplicable. However, he was just a lowly steward, so he didn't dare to go against Yin Yang's wishes. He hastily returned to Amusement Alley and planned to retrieve the note before rushing back without stopping. Just as he exited Amusement Alley, Steward Lee saw two voluptuous women dressed extremely flirtatiously. They swayed their waists as they walked towards him. One of them was a woman in her early 20s with slightly tanned skin and a bright red face. She had a slender waist as she walked over with a smile. As soon as she got close to Steward Lee, she fell into his arms as if she had no bones. She even let out a coquettish voice that gave people goosebumps. "Steward Lee, where are you planning to go in such a hurry?" Seeing that it was this coquettish woman, Steward Lee revealed his two yellow front teeth and smiled. He casually pinched the woman's body with a moderate amount of force. "Chunner, I'm going out to take care of some matters. I'll have a good chat with you later." The woman named Chun Er in front of him was not beautiful, and her figure was average. However, her skills in bed were not to be underestimated. Chief Steward Lee had tasted her twice, and even now, he still felt that he had not had enough. However, he was in a hurry to deal with Yin Yang's matter, so he didn't tease the woman. "Big Sister Chunner, look at how hurried Steward Lee is. Where is he going?" Chow Ing Chun coldly watched Steward Lee leave in a hurry, and a mocking smile appeared on her lips. She had heard that today, Chief Steward Lee accompanied Yin Yang to look for the young Crown Princess to repay her debt. He must have suffered a bellyful of anger from the Crown Prince consort. At that time, she might have a chance to take advantage of it. When she thought of this, a venomous glint flitted across Chow Ing Chun's eyes. "Arbor, you have harmed me to this extent, it would be impolite not to reciprocate." Chief Steward Lee took the debt note and returned to the Chow family. He saw the Chow family members leisurely sipping tea in the living room, chatting and laughing. They didn't care at all about Yin Yang, who was sitting on the side with a face as dark as the bottom of a pot. Everyone was chatting about Chao Sen's homework and praising the young monk for doing well. Every day, when it was time, they would immediately wake Chao Sen up to study. It was as if the time had been set. Seeing that Manager Li had returned, Auber looked at him with a faint smile, nodded, and said, "Give it to me." Chief Steward Li turned around and glanced at Yin Yang. Yin Yang gritted her teeth and nodded heavily. Only then did Chief Steward Li step forward and respectfully hand the debt note to the young Crown Princess. "Chief Steward Li, I see that you're sweating profusely. You must have been in a hurry on the way back, right? Kai Xiu, pour a cup of tea for Chief Steward Li. Oh right, don't forget about the lady boss as well." "Yes." Kai Xiu covered her mouth and snickered. She turned around and poured a cup of tea for Chief Steward Li before holding it in front of him. Chief Steward Li stiffened his neck and received the tea with trembling hands. Chapter 3496. She held it in her hands like she was holding a hot potato and didn't know whether she should throw it away or throw it away. Saishio turned around and poured another cup for Yin Yang. Yin Yang's expression was a bit uncertain. She looked at the tea on the table and didn't know how to react for a moment. "What? This is this tea bestowed by this Crown Princess. You dare to not give me face? Are you looking down on this Crown Princess?" Yin Yang gritted her teeth and gripped the teacup with trembling fingers. She fixed her gaze on the young Crown Princess. She naturally didn't dare to drink the tea the Crown Princess gave her for no reason. "Could it be that you thought this Crown Princess would poison you?" The little stoic's face darkened. Yin Yang and Steward Li both felt a piercing chill rush straight at their faces. Was the Crown Princess angry? Yin Yang smiled embarrassedly and suddenly said softly, "Crown Princess, please don't be angry. We didn't mean it that way." "Then why aren't you drinking?" Auber stared at those two with a threatening gaze, his gaze containing faint contempt. Yin Yang clenched her fists and exhaled deeply. She abruptly picked up the teacup and, as if she used all the strength in her body, was forced to take a big gulp. Yin Yang placed the teacup heavily on the table and stood up with a smile. "Since this matter is over, this commoner will not disturb you any further and will take her leave now." The young Crown Princess glanced at her indifferently and then nodded. "MHM." Yin Yang instantly sighed in relief. She originally thought that the Crown Princess would find an excuse to make things difficult for her and Steward Li. Seeing that Yin Yang drank that cup of tea, Steward Li also hurriedly downed it. He then stood up with an embarrassed smile and bowed to His Highness the Crown Prince before hastily chasing after Yin Yang. When the two people exited the Chao estate, they realized that their backs were drenched in cold sweat. The master and servant pair looked at each other. Steward Li pulled a long face and asked bitterly, "Yin Yang, what should we do? Is there any problem with the tea we drank?" Yin Yang sneered and shook her head. "I know a little about medicine. Don't you trust me?" Only then did Steward Li nod his head. He only dared to touch it because he saw Yin Yang swallow the tea. He was very clear about Yin Yang's capabilities. If someone wanted to poison her in front of her, they definitely wouldn't be able to hide it from Yin Yang's eyes. Yin Yang took a deep breath. She seemed to be suppressing a trace of anger in her chest as she said coldly, "Go back." Today's events were truly too depressing. She had never thought that she would be defeated so many times in front of the young Crown Princess. She did not even have a chance to retaliate. Steward Li saw that she didn't look worried, so he didn't dare to say any more nonsense. He hurriedly called for a carriage and helped Yin Yang into the carriage. The two of them didn't say anything as they went to Amusement Alley. However, as soon as the carriage made a turn, a group of agile masked men in black suddenly jumped down from the eaves. They pulled out their long swords and stabbed at the window of their carriage. Steward Li was scared out of his wits and couldn't help but cry out in alarm. On the other side, Auber put down his cup and coldly said, "We've only been back for less than a day and the news has already been leaked. They came to my Chao estate to show off." "Heh," Auber said with an icy gaze. "Even if they don't die, they have to be taught a lesson. Lest everyone thinks that this Crown Princess is easy to bully." Qiao Zhongbang, Wei Ziqin, and the others looked at each other in dismay. Chapter 3497. Only now did she find out that Jojo had actually secretly made a move against Yin Yang and her servant? Wei Ziqin couldn't help but want to shed a tear of sympathy for Yin Yang and her servant. Not only did they come to give away money, but they were also turned against by Jojo and had to pay back a huge debt. They thought that this matter was over, but it turned out that it wasn't. There was probably a good show waiting for the two of them on the way back. How pitiful! Wei Ziqin and Qiao Zhongbang couldn't help but shake their heads. This couple was actually still too naive. The purple forest guards that Qiao Mu secretly sent out chased after Yin Yang and manager Li all the way to the entrance of Amusement Alley. They only stopped when they reached the entrance of Amusement Alley. At this moment, Yin Yang didn't have a single good piece of flesh on her body. Steward Li was in an even worse state. His nose was bruised, his arm was broken, and a large piece of his head had been sliced off by the sword light. Blood was gushing out of it. The two of them went out in a grand fashion and returned to Jade Tripod Market in grief like beggars. When hunchbacked old Li saw their miserable state, he was so frightened that he almost fell to the ground. "Steward Li, what happened to you?" Chao Ing-chun greeted him with a frightened expression. Just as she was about to reach out to support Steward Li, he rudely pushed her away. Steward Li's entire body was in unbearable pain, so how could he still think about romantic matters? When he saw Chao Ing-chun grumbling, he couldn't help but snort angrily, "Why are you still here? Hurry back to the pink house. Don't wander around all day if you have nothing to do." Chao Ing-chun instantly felt wronged and muttered, "Steward Li, why are you scolding me like this? I'm just worried about you." At this time, Yin Yang had already been helped into the courtyard by hunchbacked old man Li. She was extremely flustered and couldn't help but look back a few times. She anxiously shouted, "Quick, quick, quick. Get someone to block the entrance of Amusement Alley. Quick." She was scared out of her wits by those purple forest guards who had beaten her while she was down. Although she didn't know who had beaten them, she had a vague feeling that the Crown Prince Consort was involved in this matter. Who did she offend? How did she end up in such a miserable state? He lost his money and almost lost his life. Hunchback Old Li quickly brought his men to the amusement alley for an inspection, and the news he brought back was that no one was following them. Yin Yang collapsed on the stool. Old Li invited a doctor from the Jade Tripod Market to treat her injuries. "What's going on, Yin Yang? Who's after you? How did you and manager Li end up in such a sorry state?" Yin Yang heaved a sigh of relief. She covered her throbbing chest with one hand and recalled the scene of dozens of agile men in black chasing after them. She couldn't help but feel a faint sense of panic in her heart. She was indeed too naive. It was probably because she had not been respectful enough in front of the Crown Princess. Who would have thought that retribution would come so quickly? Yin Yang, it's the Crown Princess, isn't it? It was that malicious woman who did it. Chao Ing-chun couldn't help but shout, her eyes flickering with flames of fury. "I knew she was a B*TCH. She bullies the weak all the time and doesn't treat us commoners as humans." "Grand Aunt Wan Wan, lower your voice." After this incident, Steward Li was completely afraid of that stoic-faced little Crown Princess. She wasn't someone he could offend. Their attitude today was still considered good, right? They even handed over spirit coins and debt. But he didn't expect that. Even so, they still incurred the wrath of the little Crown Princess and were hunted down. Manager Li could not figure it out no matter how he thought about it. Chapter 3498. Why the hell did the young Crown Princess send people to kill them? Steward Li looked around, afraid that one of the Crown Princess's hidden guards would suddenly jump down from the roof. If that happened, they would all be in trouble. Chao Ing-chun angrily said, "What are you afraid of her for? Heh, we have so many people in Jade Tripod Market, so why should we be afraid of her? Yin Yang, we absolutely can't let today's matter rest. I heard that the bitch brought the entire Chao family back.
Those people only have some mediocre martial arts skills. Just grab a few of them and you'll definitely be able to make that slut surrender without a fight. At that time, not only will we be able to take revenge for today, we might even be able to send that slut to the pink brothel and let her enjoy. Ah! Before Chow Ing-chun could finish speaking, In-yong pounced on her and gave her a ruthless slap and a kick to her chest. She flew out like a kite with a broken string and smashed into a nearby cabinet with a bang. Half of the items on the cabinet was smashed into pieces and fell to the ground. It could be seen how fast and accurate In-yong's kick was. She didn't leave any face for Chow Ing-chun. "I think you're the vicious little bitch." In-yong glared at her with cold eyes and said, "You just want our entire jade tripod market to fall into a state of eternal damnation." If Chow Ing-chun had really listened to In-yong and courted death by attacking the young crown princess, with the cultivation methods of those black-clothed people today, their entire jade tripod market would probably be destroyed right before their eyes. Gods! Send this slut back to the pink brothel. If there's nothing else, she's not allowed to leave that place. And no, In-yong, listen to me, In-yong, In-yong. Let go of me, let go. Chow Ing-chun struggled with all her might in the hunchbacked old man Li's hands. Her eyes shot out a venomous light, but she was powerless. She was thrown into the carriage and her throat was viciously choked. It was only then that she lost her voice. "Do you understand what In-yong said?" Old man Li used his large rough palm to forcefully slap her slightly tanned face twice. "In the future, don't act on your own initiative. Just do your job properly." Although Chow Ing-chun was filled with hatred, there was nothing she could do. The next day, In-yong suddenly realized that she had rashes all over her body. The symptoms didn't seem like poisoning, but she couldn't even leave the house. On the other hand, Manager Li was even more terrified. His illness was somewhat difficult to talk about. On the other hand, as the crown prince would be leaving tomorrow, the great emperor specially set up a banquet to send him off. Although it was only a small banquet held in the palace and not many people attended, the entire palace became lively because of this small banquet. The servants became busy like flowing water. The great emperor's harem was very clean. There were no concubines at all. Therefore, this small banquet should only be held by the Empress Dowager, the Emperor, Arbor, and Emolien. However, when Arbor arrived at the Extreme Time Hall's banquet hall, he discovered that there were two other unfamiliar women sitting beside the Empress Dowager. Seeing her enter, the two women stood up and bowed, saying in unison, "Greetings, Crown Princess." Chow Mu reflexively narrowed her eyes as she sized up those two girls from the corner of her eye. Their faces were elegant and beautiful, each with their own merits. The woman on the left looked more docile than the woman on the right. The woman on the right had a long, slender neck, proud and graceful like a swan's. When she bowed, her head was also held high. "This is Alchemist Dan." Empress Dowager Chen pointed at the white swan. Chapter 3499. After speaking, he pointed to the gentlewoman on the left who was bowing and said faintly, "This is Princess Yenyun of Zhu Xi country. She has been in the palace for a long time, but the crown princess has been busy and has never met her." Arbor raised her eyebrows. Zhu Xi country's Princess Yenyun? Wasn't that the woman that the old woman wanted to give to imperial father to be Emolien's stepmother? She sized her up a few times and saw that Princess Yenyun nodded slightly and gave her a faint smile. Her appearance was very beautiful, and her temperament didn't seem like a tsundere. However, when she thought that this woman wanted to steal the position of Emolien's mother, she felt a little uncomfortable. Her gaze towards Princess Yenyun gradually turned cold. She had never met her mother-in-law. Although she hadn't seen her before, she knew that she was someone who couldn't tolerate even a grain of sand in her eyes. If she really let these strange women become Lien's stepmother, wouldn't her mother-in-law be angered to death when she woke up? No, definitely not. Arbor glanced coldly at Zhu Xi country's Princess Yenyun and said, "No need to be so polite." Princess Yenyun didn't get angry when she saw her cold expression. Instead, she nodded at her in a very gentle and friendly manner and said softly, "Crown Princess, Yenyun came uninvited."
It's a bit rude.
Since this small banquet only invited family members, it was really inappropriate for Princess Yenyun and Shawnee Su to come. However, Yenyun refused the Empress Dowager's invitation several times and couldn't refuse. She could only brace herself and come. However, Pill Master Dan, who was sitting next to her, seemed very happy. He must be very interested in this small banquet. One couldn't hit a smiling person. The little crown princess was indeed a bad person, but she never threw a tantrum at a smiling person for no reason. Seeing that Princess Yenyun's attitude was good and she spoke to her apologetically, she couldn't keep her face cold. She nodded and said, "Princess is a guest from afar. Since you were invited by the Empress Dowager, you can enjoy the banquet in peace." It was obvious who brought these two women here. The great emperor wouldn't be so bored. He had probably forgotten about Princess Yenyun long ago. Empress Dowager Chen's heart was in a mess and she broke out in a cold sweat. She thought that the little crown princess would definitely fly into a rage when she saw the two extra people in the hall. At that time, she could take the opportunity to go to the emperor and say that the little crown princess was too domineering and unruly. She really needed to hire a nanny to teach her well so that she would not embarrass the royal family in the future. Unexpectedly, the little crown princess seemed to be a completely different person today. Not only did she not flare up at all, but her etiquette and rules were also very proper. He really couldn't see through this person. Thinking of that day when the little crown princess looked at her coldly like a ghost and threatened her word for word, Empress Dowager Chen's heart tightened and her hand holding the fan tightened. Although this little girl was young, she was definitely a ruthless character. Just as Qiao Mu was led to sit down at the round table, someone came over to announce with a grin that the Prince of Zheng, Mo Shikong, had come with the princess consort of Zheng.
Aba frowned slightly.
The Prince of Zheng's family had been very quiet recently, as if they were invisible. She had forgotten that her adopted brother's family would also be attending the small banquet. "Greetings, Your Highness the Empress Dowager." Prince Mo Shikong and Princess Consort Shi Yongyan stepped forward and bowed.
Chapter 3500.
Hence, Qiao Mu's gaze landed on that vassal consort Zhang, and she gazed at her meaningfully. The Shi family didn't have time to mess with them these 2 days. After the crown prince left the capital and she was free, she would definitely come to their family's second miss to give a grand gift.
Shi Yongyan bowed her head slightly in greeting. Suddenly, she felt a slight chill on her neck.
She subconsciously raised her head and met Aba's cold eyes. For some reason, Shi Yongyan's body trembled slightly. There was a kind of panic that spread from the bottom of her heart. The little crown princess's gaze was as cold as water. It was bone-chilling, frightening people to the point that they didn't dare to take a second look.
What was going on?
Shi Yongyan couldn't help but feel a burst of fear. A chill ran up from the soles of her feet. Her strange behavior immediately attracted the attention of Mo Shikong, who was beside her. Mo Shikong quickly reached out to hold her hand and passed on a faint trace of power to her. His eyes were unreservedly sharp as he coldly turned to Aba's direction. There seemed to be invisible sparks in the air, making chi-chi sounds. In the 2 consecutive calls of "His Majesty has arrived" and "His Highness the Crown Prince has arrived," it slowly disappeared. Empress Dowager Chen chuckled and let Mo Shikong and his wife rise. Everyone also rose to greet His Majesty and the Crown Prince. Princess Yenyun and Alchemist Dan greeted Mo Shikong and Princess Consort Zheng before sitting down.
"Alchemist Dan, are you used to living in the palace?" the emperor asked casually.
Dan Isu stretched her beautiful and slender neck and nodded with a smile.
"Very used to it."
"Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty." Aba couldn't help but sneer in his heart.
However, he didn't show it on his face.
When Mo Lien saw Mo Shikong and his wife, as well as the 2 extra idlers, he merely creased his brows. Afterwards, he attentively picked up food for his wife and served her food. The Crown Prince originally thought that only the Empress Dowager would be invited to this small banquet. He didn't expect to invite Mo Shikong and his wife, as well as Princess Yenyun and alchemist Dan. Inviting Mo Shikong was a bit more prestigious. In any case, Mo Shikong and his wife were his nominal brother and sister-in-law.
But why did Princess Yenyun invite him?
There was also no need to invite Pill Master Dan over.
It was just a small family gathering. Why would they invite these random people? Although Emolien didn't say anything, she couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. It seemed like the old madam's naive idea still hadn't been dismissed. She still wanted to introduce Princess Yenyun to his imperial father. The emperor pretended that he didn't know the Empress Dowager's plan. He exchanged a few words with Sangown Su and said, "Originally, I invited you here to treat the Empress's illness. However, the situation is a little urgent now.
Let's wait until you return from Grey Ping village before we take a look at the Empress."
Su Ming's eyes were bright, and she smiled faintly. "This humble girl will naturally obey your Majesty's decree."
"Don't worry, Your Majesty.
I'm very familiar with the area around Greyfield village. I'll do my best to assist your highness."
Arbor was taken aback. His hand that was holding the chopsticks paused. He glanced at his husband and glared at him threateningly.
"You didn't say that this woman would go with you?"
The Crown Prince was also taken aback.
Clearly, he didn't know either. It seemed like the Emperor and Pill Master Dan had reached a consensus in private. Emolien frowned.
"The journey is long. There's no need for Pill Master Dan to trouble you."
Chapter 35:01.
Single-clothed Su didn't seem to understand the Crown Prince's tactful refusal at all. She turned to look at the Crown Prince with sparkling eyes and said with a faint smile, "Susu is very touched that Your Highness the Crown Prince sympathizes with Susu, but Your Highness doesn't need to worry about Susu. Since Susu was able to crawl out of that zombie nest, she naturally has a way to bring Your Highness group inside stealthily."
Heh, she kept saying Susu. It looked like she was very familiar with the Crown Prince.
The young Crown Prince consort glanced at her, a hint of indifference in her eyes.
Truly a self-righteous fellow.
She would just sit on the side and watch how her husband slapped her in the face. Emolien creased his brows and coldly swept her a glance. He turned to say to the Emperor, "I'm not used to bringing women with me in the army."
Single-clothed Su's faint smile froze. The Emperor also couldn't help but be taken aback.
He then advised his child, "Alchemist Shan is at least familiar with the environment there, and her pill refinement skills are miraculous. If you bring her along, you'll get twice the result with half the effort, and father will also be at ease."
Emolien shook his head.
"No need. It's inconvenient for a woman like her to follow the army." As a result, single-clothed Su's smile completely froze on her face. She didn't expect His Highness the Crown Prince to speak so bluntly and not give her any face. She was a divine-rank alchemist renowned in the 3 provinces after all. When had she ever suffered this kind of disrespect? Single-clothed Su didn't show any dissatisfaction on her face. She merely froze for a moment before smiling again and saying, "Since Your Highness the Crown Prince insists that you don't need Susu to follow, then Susu won't join in the fun."
"How can that be?"
The Queen Dowager hastily pulled her hand and advised, "The journey to Greyfield village is long and fraught with danger. If there isn't an outstanding alchemist in the army, how can the Crown Prince's safety be guaranteed? There are alchemists and apothecaries in the army, so there's no need for the Queen Dowager to worry."
Emolien icily interrupted the elderly lady's words and picked up a bamboo shoot for his wifey.
The little stoic was expressionless, as if their words didn't match her at all.
She only ate 2 mouthfuls of the food the Crown Prince gave her. Her small mouth moved, but she didn't feel like responding to them.
The Emperor was baffled, and he reflexively turned to look at the little stoic. However, he was amused by her nonchalant attitude.
"Crown Princess, what do you think?"
The Emperor couldn't bear to see his daughter-in-law idling on the side. Hearing this, Empress Dowager Chen turned to look at Arbor and said calmly, "The Crown Princess is a sensible person. She should know how to persuade the Crown Prince." Arbor glanced at her, put down his chopsticks, wiped his mouth, and said expressionlessly, "I'll listen to my husband. If my husband feels that it's not appropriate to bring a woman into the army, then don't bring her." Mo Lien curled his lips. "Emperor, you don't look like someone who's easy to talk to. Listen to everything your husband says? Why don't I see you being so virtuous and sensible usually?" Emperor couldn't help but want to bicker with this daughter-in-law. After thinking about it, he restrained himself. As a father, he couldn't lower himself to a child's level. Calm down, calm down." Empress Dowager Chen was also choked by the little crown princess, and she couldn't help but frown. "Crown princess, it's the entire army's fortune to have Alchemist Dan accompany the army. With Alchemist Dan, I believe that the lives of the soldiers will be greatly guaranteed." "No need." Mo Lien coldly rejected her. "Everything in the army will be handled by the army physician." Chapter 3502. Empress Dowager Chen still wanted to say something, but the emperor waved his hand and said indifferently, "Since the crown prince doesn't want to take Alchemist Dan with him, then so be it." Dan Yi-su nodded understandingly. Empress Dowager Chen couldn't help but frown when she saw this. She really felt a bit stuffy in her heart. It could be said that the crown prince was a dragon and phoenix among men, but his heart was simply too honest. Look at this moment. There were so many people sitting here, but the crown prince only had eyes for the crown princess. As the crown prince, he busied himself around his wife all day long. Looking at how he served the dishes, it was clear that he usually did this at home. Empress Dowager Chen looked at Arbor with a sharper gaze, as if she was looking at a demon who would bring disaster to the country and the people. Her eyes were full of disapproval. Arbor was too lazy to pay attention to this old lady. Anyway, people who didn't like her no matter how they looked at her. She wouldn't live with this old lady in the future, so why should she be angry with her? She was too lazy to pay attention to her. She ignored the old lady, but the old lady didn't want to let her go. She wanted to find fault in everything. After a few bites, the old lady said indifferently, "King Zheng, I just heard that you and the crown princess had some disagreements a few days ago? Is there such a thing?" Mo Shikong's fingers tightened slightly. He hid the trace of anger in his eyes and lowered his head in silence. Sitting next to him, Princess Consort Zhang, Shi Yongyan, hurriedly smiled and smoothed things over. "It's nothing. Thank you for your concern, Empress Dowager. Speaking of which, the crown princess is His Highness's sister-in-law. How can His Highness be at odds with her?" "Oh." The old Empress Dowager glanced sharply at Shi Yongyan and then turned to look at Arbor. "I heard that the crown princess took care of King Zheng's younger brother, Su Shihua, in the academy a few days ago? You seem to have heard a lot of things." Arbor sneered. His attitude was naturally not respectful at all. The Empress Dowager's eyes flashed with anger. She had long known that this girl was extremely disrespectful to her. At this time, seeing that she dared to mock her in front of the great emperor, she slammed the wine cup on the table with a bang. "How rude." Empress Dowager Chen turned to look at the emperor and tried to persuade him. "Your Majesty, you saw it with your own eyes. The crown princess is so unruly. How can she be the mother of the nation in the future? In my opinion, we should find 2 nannies to teach the crown princess proper etiquette in the palace." Mo Lien angrily tossed the wine glass away. Without saying a word, he pulled his wife up. She coldly said, "In the future, Imperial Father doesn't need to invite us husband and wife to such small banquets." Everyone's faces immediately turned awkward. Did the crown prince think that everyone present, except for his Imperial Father, was an unrelated person? Empress Dowager Chen was so angry at Prince Mo that she almost fell backwards. She trembled as someone helped her up and pointed in the crown prince's direction. The emperor couldn't help but feel a bit angry. Although he had been very filial to the Empress Dowager for the sake of the previous emperor, between his son and the Empress Dowager, he could only choose his son. Thus, he couldn't help but grumble, "Empress Dowager, why do you keep mentioning nannies? The crown princess is a spiritual realm cultivator.
She usually has to cultivate. The meaning behind her words was, who would have the free time to come and learn your palace etiquette all day long? Chapter 3503. Little Glutinous Dumpling, Stop Right There. The Crown Prince's back stiffened slightly. This unreliable father of his actually called him by such a strange name in public. He really wanted to slap him. The Emperor hurriedly flashed in front of the two and glared at his willful son with displeasure. Imperial father knows that you dote on your wife, but you, he lowered his voice and said to the Crown Prince, your grandmother is old. She threw away her wine cup and left after saying a few words to your wife. Aren't you making things difficult for your wife? Besides, why are you being so calculative with an old lady like her? It's not difficult for me. Auber looked at the Emperor blankly. What's difficult about me? My mother taught me that I have to obey my husband when I get married. I have to do whatever my husband says. Emolien, the Emperor, the two of them looked at each other. The Emperor glared fiercely at his son several times. His daughter-in-law's bad habit was most likely caused by his son's indulgence. She even said that she had to obey her husband when she got married? Ha ha. If his son wanted to rebel, just see if this little thing would reach out and viciously slap his son to death. She kept saying that she had to obey her husband when she got married because his simple-minded son had completely expressed what she wanted to express. Of course she had to obey her husband because she was simply obeying her own heart. Useless fellow. The Emperor glared at his son several times, using his eyes to convey this message. Emolien looked innocent and raised her hand to firmly grasp Auber's small hand. Imperial father, my wife is mine. If I don't dote on her, who else would dote on her more? Look at this palace. Everyone wants to make things difficult for her. Emolien tilted her head and considered for a moment, then said, I'd better not leave the capital. What if those blind people come to torment her again after I leave the capital? What should I do then? My wife is so weak, helpless, and pitiful. She'll be taken advantage of and wronged. The Emperor rolled his eyes every time Emolien said something. When she said that she was weak, helpless, pitiful, and wronged, the Emperor's nostrils were about to spit fire. What a deceptive son. Your father really wants to ask you, ever since the two of you returned to the Divine Land, when has your wife ever suffered any losses or grievances? I'm not going to Grey Ping village. Emolien had a solemn expression as she said, Imperial father, it's better to send foster brother to handle such an important matter. Emo Shikong's eyes lit up slightly. Taking advantage of the situation, he got up and cupped his hands. This son is willing to serve Imperial father. The great Emperor narrowed his eyes and turned back to roar at his son. You said you'd go, but now you're backing out. Aren't you just worried that your wife will be bullied? Imperial father promises you. Chapter 3504. The Emperor's decree was no joke. It was the only decree that could mobilize millions of soldiers in the entire Divine Prefecture. This stinking brat was treating it like a child's play. He wanted to give it to his wife as a gift. F***ck, if it weren't for his precious son, he really wanted to slap this stinking brat to death. The Emperor's face darkened as he said angrily, Go, get the phoenix seal and give it to the Crown Princess. Empress Dowager Chen jumped up from her seat and almost jumped up. How can I do that? Empress Dowager Chen's voice changed in surprise. Giving the phoenix seal to the Crown Princess was something that had never happened in the thousands of years since the Divine Prefecture's founding. That was something that absolutely could not be done. Empress Dowager Chen said sternly, Your Majesty, this is unreasonable. For thousands of years, the Divine Prefecture has never given the phoenix seal to the Crown Princess. Zhang Wang, Emo Shikong, also lowered his head slightly at this time, hiding the disappointment in his eyes. Compared to himself, the Emperor trusted his own son more. He even gave something like the Emperor's decree to his son. It was obvious that he had high hopes for him. As for himself,
Although he tried his best to perform in front of the great emperor's attitude towards him was always the same, neither salty nor indifferent.
Princess Consort Zheng raised her hand and tugged at her husband's sleeve. She put on a moderate smile. She knew very well that she and her husband only needed to be spectators.
There was no room for them to interfere in this matter. Whoever the emperor wanted to give the phoenix seal to was the emperor's business. As for Empress Dowager Chen, the older she got, the more muddle-headed she became.
She didn't even think about who she depended on to live a life of luxury in the palace.
The crown prince was the emperor's only son. The Empress Dowager was always against the crown prince and always wanted to compete with the little crown princess.
If this wasn't stupid, then what was?
Shi Yongyan restrained the sharp glint in her eyes. She lowered her head and smiled without saying a word.
Empress Dowager Chen still refused to give up.
Your Majesty, this is absolutely unacceptable. The crown prince and the crown princess are still not officially married.
How can you give her the phoenix seal?
Moreover, even if they were married, they couldn't hand over the phoenix seal, right? The phoenix seal was used to control the imperial harem. If the phoenix seal was given to the crown princess, wouldn't she, the Empress Dowager, be inferior to the little crown princess in the future? No, absolutely not.
She was dead set against it.
The Empress Dowager looked at Arbor with a gloomy face, then turned to the emperor and said earnestly, Your Majesty, this is absolutely inappropriate. However, the great emperor ignored the old lady and ordered his eunuch to carry out the task. Not long after, the eunuch came in with small steps, holding a white jade box in his hand, and respectfully handed it to the great emperor.
Empress Dowager Chen's eyes instantly sharpened. He stared at the stubborn great emperor in disbelief.
As far as she was concerned, the actions of the grand emperor were simply stupid beyond compare. How could he listen to the crown prince and directly give the phoenix seal to the little crown princess? This was definitely inappropriate. However, she couldn't think of a better reason to persuade the great emperor to give up on this terrifying idea.
The crown princess and the crown prince are about to marry. Giving the phoenix seal to her isn't a violation of the ancestral laws, the great emperor said calmly. Chapter 3505.
In his view, if the young crown prince consort could have more people be more respectful to her after she gained control of the phoenix seal, there probably wouldn't be any trouble for her in the future. She also wouldn't have to terrifyingly turn into a violent person and retaliate against others. Therefore, the world would be at peace and the country would celebrate.
This was a wonderful thing. Moreover, he didn't want to go against his son's wishes. Speaking of which, the emperor was actually a father who doted on his son.
It was just that he wouldn't admit it on the surface. He was a wise and decisive emperor of the divine prefecture.
How could he dote on his son? Did he still have any shame?
Xiao Mu cast the emperor a sidelong glance before looking at Her Majesty the Queen Dowager, whose face was flushed red and who was trembling uncontrollably all over. She apathetically reached out to take the mutton-fat white jade box that the emperor handed over, casually opening it to take a look. A golden phoenix seal was placed in the middle of the box. It shone brightly and looked extremely dazzling. Arbor felt that the phoenix seal was quite small and pretty. He picked it up and looked at it. He saw a phoenix soaring in the 9 heavens at the bottom. The carving was extremely exquisite and lifelike. He liked it even more. This phoenix seal belongs to your mother. I'm giving it to you now. You have to take good care of it. Don't lose or damage it. The great emperor was still worried, so he warned the child not to play with the phoenix seal on impulse. She wasn't stupid. Why would she play around with the phoenix seal for no reason? She wasn't crazy. The little crown princess looked at the emperor as if he was looking at an idiot. That look made the emperor want to go berserk.
Why was this child so uncute?
Your Majesty. Empress Dowager Chen wanted to say something, but the emperor reached out to stop her.
All right, Empress Dowager. This emperor has made up his mind. That's all.
Empress Dowager Chen was anxious and angry, but she couldn't do anything.
She could only nod and admit defeat for now.
However, in her heart, she couldn't help but be more wary of the little crown princess. Don't look at this girl's cold and unscheming appearance.
She definitely wasn't that simple now.
She went with the flow and accepted the crown prince's words.
Didn't she feel embarrassed at all? Only then did the great emperor smile. He turned around and glared at his son. You can rest assured now. Go to Greyfield Village and do everything well.
You've brought shame to your father.
Understood. The crown prince replied unwillingly. All right, the food is getting cold. Come and sit down.
The great emperor roared at his son and daughter-in-law.
Stop throwing a tantrum.
Your grandmother is old and has lived in the palace for so many years.
Naturally, she is conservative about everything. As her children, you should show her some respect.
You must not have any more conflicts with your grandmother. The great emperor gave the crown prince and the little crown princess a warning look.
The young couple curled their lips in a non-committal manner.
They had the same expression and the same look in their eyes, which made the great emperor feel both amused and annoyed.
These two children.
When they were in the lower star domain in the past, didn't his branch brothers feel stifled when they saw these two clumsy fellows? This son of his was definitely a little scoundrel in the lower star domain as well. Far away on Seekong planet, the old great King Mo Lei sneezed 3 times in a row, looking dazed as if someone was nagging at him. After Abba sat down, Shi Yongyan smiled and hurriedly poured her another cup of wine. Then she said, "Crown Princess, please."
Chapter 3506.
The young crown prince consort looked meaningfully at this woman and nodded lightly at her. Empress Dowager Chen adjusted her state of mind and smiled at the emperor.
Princess Yen Yun came from afar. Your Majesty has been busy with official business and didn't see her much. This is the 3rd time you've met, right?
Princess Yen Yun had been standing obediently at the side.
When she heard the Empress Dowager mention her, she had no choice but to raise her head.
Her eyes were clear and gentle as she looked at the emperor.
She smiled faintly and said, "Yen Yun greets your Majesty." The emperor nodded slightly, but his eyes narrowed. It seemed that these people were quite concerned about his preferences.
He took a closer look and found that Princess Yen Yun's phoenix eyes were quite similar to his wife Wu Xia's. It was obvious that these people had worked hard. The emperor suddenly felt a little tired. He glanced at the Empress Dowager and felt that this old woman was meddling too much. Not only did she worry about his son and daughter-in-law, but she also always wanted to reach into his harem. The emperor frowned slightly and suddenly felt that the dishes in front of him were a little more tasteless.
His poor Wu Xia was still lying in that cold place. Because he was worried that every time he opened that layer of ice, he might damage her body. He had to endure and not disturb her sleep. His Wu Xia wasn't actually dead. He could hear her heartbeat.
But after so many years, her heartbeat had become slower and slower. If he couldn't make the soul-returning pill as soon as possible, he was afraid. Thinking of this, the emperor didn't want to stay here and listen to Empress Dowager Chen's endless chatter about Princess Yen Yun.
Little glutinous dumpling, you have to leave at dawn tomorrow. If there's nothing else, go back early and pack up.
The emperor meant that the meeting was adjourned. Poor Empress Dowager Chen, who was enthusiastically talking about Princess Yen Yun, was suddenly interrupted and looked a little embarrassed.
Shi Yongqian pulled her husband up and bowed to the emperor at the same time.
"Father, rest early too." The emperor nodded and gave his son a look before leaving.
After saying goodbye to the Empress Dowager, he strode away.
Empress Dowager Chen glared at the emperor's back with a bit of annoyance.
She suddenly felt like she couldn't control her son anymore. No matter how much she nagged, the emperor was like a one-track mind.
Look at what he had done to his harem over the past decade.
Many palaces and courtyards were empty.
Even if there were some beauties in the harem, their fates were the same as Princess Yen Yun's. Some of them had been in the palace for 3 to 4 years, but they still didn't get to see the emperor.
Princess Yen Yun didn't get angry.
Instead, she smiled and said, "Your Majesty and the Empress are deeply in love."
"I've long heard about it. Your Majesty doesn't need to force your Majesty to accept her. The little crown princess looked at Princess Yen Yun curiously. She saw that her eyes were clear, as if she really didn't care about His Majesty's attitude. He immediately felt that she should be an interesting girl. The two of them left the palace and boarded the carriage. Starlight accompanied them all the way to the Eastern Palace. Jojo, after your husband leaves, you must take good care of yourself. Emolien reached out and pulled her into his arms, gently brushing away a strand of hair from her temples. You must make me feel at ease. Sir Jojo nodded vigorously. She raised her hand and wrapped it around his neck, whispering, "Come back early." Okay. His phoenix eyes curved slightly. His thin lips pressed down and covered hers. Chapter 35:07. The land of Tsong Prefecture was filled with immortal traces. Looking down, one would see a meandering water vein slowly flowing across the land toward the Sea of Forgetfulness. Taiji Palace. It was already dusk. As the setting sun shone, the melodious sound of a zither drifted through the air. Noble consort Duan led Nanny Lin all the way to her son's bedchamber under the sunset glow, and her expression became a bit strange. Along the way, the Taiji Palace was completely empty. He didn't know where those dogs of a slave had sneaked off to hide. Noble consort Duan knitted her brows and glanced sideways at Nanny Lin. Nanny Lin said with a smile, "Perhaps His Highness dismissed them all." Noble consort Duan thought about her son's temperament and nodded in deep agreement. That's right, her son never liked having too many people around him, and he didn't like having a group of servants disturbing him. According to his temperament, she was afraid that what Mother Lin said was true. Mother Lin reached out to push open the door and walked in with noble consort Duan. Both of them revealed a trace of surprise. This bedchamber was also empty without a single person in sight. Inside the spacious bedchamber, yellow silk gauze curtains that hung to the ground slowly fluttered in the wind. The long window was only half open, and there was a faint sandalwood fragrance burning inside, but Duan Yu was nowhere to be seen. Noble consort Duan and Nanny Lin searched around the spacious bedchamber but didn't find him. The master and servant looked at each other, and their expressions simultaneously changed. A junior eunuch happened to poke his head out at the bedchamber's entrance. Just as he wanted to shrink back, he was berated by Nanny Lin, who was by noble consort Duan's side. "Xiao Kuzi, what are you doing sneaking around?" Nanny Lin shouted angrily. That junior eunuch called Xiao Kuzi jumped in fright and hastily ran in with his neck shrunk. He quickly saluted, "Greetings, noble consort. Where is His Highness?" Noble consort Duan asked angrily with a sullen expression. "Good, you bunch of wicked servants. You actually dare to make things difficult for His Highness? There isn't even a single servant to serve in this enormous Taiji Palace? You guys are also hemming and hawing about where His Highness went. What exactly are you doing?" Nanny Lin coldly reprimanded. Xiao Kazi was so frightened that he rolled onto the ground and repeatedly kowtowed as he cried out, "Your Highness, please calm down. Your Highness, please calm down." Still not telling the truth? Mother Lin sternly reprimanded. His Highness has not come out since he went into seclusion a few days ago. He is still in the underground secret room. The young eunuch stuttered, almost unable to speak a complete sentence. Actually, His Highness had been in seclusion for a total of 13 days. Before His Highness went into seclusion, he told them that he could come out in 7 days. But now, it had been more than 6 days and there was still no movement. The eunuchs and palace maids in Taiji Palace were actually worried to death, but they were too scared to make a sound. Usually, everyone would hide themselves away, afraid that they would be the scapegoat if something happened. Now that noble consort Duan was here, Xiao Kuzi had no choice but to come out and meet her. Actually, Xiao Kuzi was also panicking. His Highness had not shown up for so many days. Could it be that he was possessed? If something really happened to His Highness, then it would be the end of their lives for these servants. Xiao Kuzi's face was sullen as he replied in a sobbing voice, "Every word this servant said is true. May your Highness,
Noble consort Duan, please understand. Noble consort Duan immediately stood up. Where is the secret room? Bring me there to take a look. She was really too worried about her son. He had not come to pay his respects to her for so many days. As expected, something had happened.
Chapter 3508.
Xiao Kezi looked up at noble consort Duan nervously and said with a bitter face, Your Highness, Prince Chen said not to disturb him when he is in seclusion.
How dare you?
Mother Lin scolded. Do you still want to hide it from Her Highness? If His Highness is in seclusion for a long time, he will definitely tell Her Highness. Since he didn't say, he will definitely come out in 3 to 6 days. Noble consort Duan was flustered and felt that her mother's words were very reasonable. Could it be that something really happened to him? She tried her best to stay calm and sober and looked at Mother Lin. Then she scolded Xiao Kezi to lead the way and led them to the small underground room. This small room was built in the back hall for the convenience of the master's cultivation. After walking down the stairs, noble consort Duan and Mother Lin saw several stone rooms with different patterns engraved on the door grooves. Which one? It's the innermost room, Xiao Kezi said with trepidation. Noble consort Duan glared at the servant. His Highness hasn't come out for so many days. Don't you servants know to come to my palace to report? These people really didn't care about her son. Noble consort Duan's eyes instantly became sharp and cold. Xiao Kezi trembled and quickly led the two to the door of the small stone room. Your Highness, it's right here. Noble consort Duan nodded slightly and raised her hand to touch the cold stone door. Then she pressed her finger on a round stone plate. Just as she was about to press it down, Xiao Kezi couldn't help but remind her in a low voice, Your Highness, although I am a mortal, I know that cultivators are most afraid of being disturbed during their cultivation. If we accidentally disturb His Highness, will it cause His Highness to go into chi deviation? He said carefully. Noble consort Duan's hand that was pressing the stone button suddenly stopped and she couldn't help but hesitate. She didn't know if she would harm her son in an impulse. Xiao Kezi bowed behind the two and whispered, Your Highness, why don't we go up and wait? Noble consort Duan felt her eyelids twitching and felt that something was going to happen. She shook her head. Just as she withdrew her hand, she heard the door of the stone room rumble from inside. The stone door slowly moved upward. Duan Yu's slender figure appeared at the door. When he saw his mother, he was a bit surprised. Mother, why are you here? Noble consort Duan carefully sized up her son, took his hand, and asked, Ali, why do you look so pale? Aren't you cultivating in seclusion? Although she couldn't cultivate, she at least had some common sense. Usually, when a cultivator came out of seclusion, they would be very refreshed. Unless there were signs of chi deviation, noble consort Duan's heart skipped a beat. She held her son's hand and asked, Ali, are you hiding something from your mother? Your face is so pale. Did you encounter some difficulties in your cultivation? Duan Yu forced a smile and shook his head. Mother, what are you saying? Nothing happened at all. Let's go up first. After saying that, he helped his mother out of the underground room and returned to the bedroom. Ali, don't hide it from your mother. Why would I hide it from mother? Duan Yu smiled and helped his mother sit down. He then asked, did something happen on mother's side? Noble consort Duan shook her head with a smile. His hand pressed against his chest, and he found it difficult to breathe. Humph, don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Don't forget, I'm your ancestor. That voice icily said, if it weren't for my bloodline entering your body, would you have your current realm and cultivation that soared by leaps and bounds? Long-winded. Duan Yu clenched his fist and directly erased that voice from his mind. An eerie chill suffused his body, and lustrous beads of sweat trickled down his jade-like forehead.
At worst, he would just gouge out his bones and blood to return your bloodline. You want to force him to give up half of his body? Dream on. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.